Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends, I've done 3 videos this week. They're all ready and sitting waiting to go, but pending approval from Snowprint, I'm not sure what order they will go out in. Keep an eye out for the other videos where I break down the new faction with 3 character previews, as well as a video on the Ragnar Blackmane Legendary Release event with associated infographics. Before I dive into all of that, a quick shout out of the winners of last month's Calgar giveaway. 3 out of the 4 winners have claimed their prize. Paul Gray, I'll give you another week to step forward before re-rolling your 50 shard prize. Please just drop me a message on Discord. For those of you that missed out, don't worry as I run these giveaways regularly on my channel. Just stay tuned for the next one. On to the Black Templar reworks. I don't have gameplay footage, but the team at Snowprint have been kind enough to provide text descriptions of everything. Sword brother Godswyl gets the rapid assault trait. This gives him +1 movement until he makes a melee attack, and also gives that first hit 25% extra damage. He sees his damage stat increased by 10%. His active ability also now applies stunned to the target, which is a pretty big upgrade, essentially giving him movement 4 on turn 1 and letting him stun an enemy. His passive has been reworked as described in red. Now, after moving, he does a single attack to an enemy and reduces their armor for the remainder of the battle. The developer comments here talk about the motivation to increase Godswyl's effectiveness in PvP and to make him more mobile. To that end, I think the changes they've implemented have achieved things well. On the bottom right, I have updated Godswyl's stats radar and have my friend Tawan to thank for his tireless efforts in keeping the stats metrics up to date. If you haven't already, go check out his spreadsheet which gives you all of that stat info and more. I'll leave a link to his Discord in the video description below. Up next we get brother Burchard. He gets the Crushing Strike trait, which means that he does 50% extra melee damage if he hasn't moved. He gets a reduction in his melee hits and ranged hits, but this is made up for in his reworked passive. His damage stat is doubled and he suffers a slight reduction in armor. Burchard's passive has been reworked to always give him 3 bonus hits on the primary target and adjacent enemies within range. The developer comments here talk about how the character is already reasonably placed in the meta, particularly for legendary events. They have broadened his usefulness by increasing his damage, and I think that's a good way of rounding this particular character out. Ancient Thoread has a small increase to his damage stat, but both active and passive abilities have been completely reworked. His active ability has been renamed Unbreakable Duty. It gives Thoread and all friendly units within 2 hexes a percentage increase to damage. If 2 or more Imperial characters are dead, Thoread also attacks a random adjacent enemy and gains health and damage till the end of the battle. A lot will depend on the final numbers, but I'm a really big fan of percentage damage increases, given the way that damage is calculated in this game, and Thoread's already impressive damage stat. His passive has also been reworked and now gives all friendly units within 2 hexes an additional melee hit whenever they attack. The developer comments here talk about how he has been completely reworked to fit the flavour of the faction as a more offensively minded character. I'm pleased with that, and the active in particular sounds like it'll make him a big threat if not dealt with early. His active is especially useful in Tournament Arena, where player-controlled casualties are almost expected. Brother Jaeger also gets the Rapid Assault trait and an additional hit on his melee attack. The changes we see for him are around his passive, which gets an average increase in damage by roughly 91%, making it almost twice as strong. There's also apparently a new visual cue, similar to Overwatch, to represent this passive effect. The biggest strength of Jaeger's rework, I think, is the bonus movement on turn 1, which will allow him to move 4 and then apply a devastating taunt to an enemy. Finally, High Marshal Helbrecht. Here we get the addition of the Final Vengeance trait alongside health and armor stat boosts. His active ability has been given an extra line of text that essentially turns it into a free action. Now, whenever he uses it, he also makes a melee attack straight away. Given that Helbrecht is often used in conjunction with Bellator against Tyranid bosses, this is a pretty big buff to him by allowing him to increase the potency of the Bellator summons. Overall thoughts for the rework are positive. I'm a big fan of the developers recognizing that some characters are weaker than others, particularly those that came out at the game's inception. All 5 of the Black Templar characters are stronger now, and the addition of the Rapid Assault trait means that the faction really becomes quite threatening and able to get into melee quite quickly. I think that will serve them well for PvP, which is becoming increasingly relevant with the recent announcement of Guild Wars. There are 2 characters here who I think will benefit the most. The first is Helbrecht. His passive ability now is essentially free, and he is already among the top characters in the game to use against the Tervigon and Hive Tyrant raid bosses. The other character who I think also has a lot of potential is Thoread, and I think this will come down to the final numbers they settle on for his active ability, simply because passive ability damage, or rather passive damage increases, is phenomenally powerful. The faction seems to play a bit like Leroy Jenkins, charging forward and hoping for the best, which, from my understanding, is par for the course for the Black Templars. The main negative I have to draw from the rework is the lack of a faction trait. I really like stuff that ties the faction together, Markerlight, Contagions of Nurgle, and Weaver of Fates being some recent examples of faction traits. It looks on the surface like the Black Templars can all be pulled apart and used in different teams. While that's fine, I would like there to be greater incentives for bringing a complete faction, particularly with Alliance Wars on the horizon. Snowprint have shown a willingness to buff older and weaker characters, and off the top of my head I came up with the following list. I think that the Orcs are in dire need of some help, and I hope that they are next on the menu. If anyone from Snowprint is watching this video, please consider adding a faction trait to the Orcs. For the reasons highlighted, it really helps to tie together a faction. I could think of 4 other individual characters who also probably warrant a relook. Certus, Incisus, and Thutmose suffer, I think, largely for the same reasons as the Orcs and the Black Templar. Shadowsun, Tau bias aside, is easily the weakest of the new legendary characters, comparing unfavourably even to the older legendary characters, and I think she desperately needs some tweaks to her kit and or stats. That's all I've got for today. If you've enjoyed the video and my content, please consider using the referral code on screen. It will earn you 100 Blackstone and support me in the work that I do. However, it is single use, so choose who you support carefully. As mentioned previously, I'm also planning on doing a video where I cover the new faction and showing you 3 characters for the faction, as well as covering Ragnar in his legendary release event video. The channel will be picking back up, and I just wanted to thank all of you for indulging me a little holiday. Feel free to pop by our Discord, linked in the video description, if you want to see these infographics or are thinking of joining a new competitive guild. Bye for now.
Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!